All right. Welcome out. Here we are for lesson 15. We're just one away from the end. Tolerance. Let's get right to it. There are two significant features about intolerance, and your attention is directed to those at the beginning of this lesson. These features are: first, intolerance is a form of ignorance, which must be mastered before any form of enduring success may be obtained. Very true. It is the chief cause of all wars. It makes enemies in business and in professions. It distinguishes the organized forces of society in 1,000 forms and stands like a mighty giant as a barrier to the abolition of war. It dethrones reason and substitutes mob psychology in its place. Second, intolerance is the chief disintegrating force in the organized religions of the world, where it plays havoc with the greatest power for good there is on this earth. By breaking up that power into small sects and dominations which spend as much effort opposing each other as they do in destroying the evils of the world. True. Intolerance. Intolerance is really, to the greatest degree, selfish, self-focused. It's ignorant. It's not seeking enlightenment, understanding. As I said, it's selfish. It's not giving. When you're in a giving state, you're listening. You're putting yourself on hold. You're being tolerant. Intolerance is just the opposite of that. You don't care. It's all about you. What you think, what you feel, what you've experienced, what you perceive to be. Right? A lot of negative connotations to intolerance, right? But this indictment against intolerance is general. Let's see how it affects you, the individual. It is, of course, obvious that anything which impedes the progress of civilization stands also as a barrier to each individual. And stating it conversely, anything that beclouds the mind of the individual and retards his mental, moral, and spiritual development retards also the progress of civilization. That's right. Because civilization is made up of individuals, all of which is an abstract statement of a great truth. And inasmuch as an abstract statement are neither interesting nor highly informative, let us proceed to illustrate more concretely the damaging effects of intolerance. I will begin this illustration by describing an incident which I have mentioned quite freely in practically every public address that I have delivered within the past 5 years, inasmuch as the cold printed page has a modifying effect, which makes possible the misinterpretation of the incident here described. I believe it necessary to caution you not to read the back of the lines of meaning I had no intention of placing there, and so forth and so on. Okay. So he's going to go on and again develop this idea of intolerance that's spoken to in the abstract or in the specifics here, described, and then or explained, kind of like laying down a principle or a law or a concept, right? And once you lay down that law or principle or concept, in order to expand it, in order for the individual to really see it, understand it, you take some type of evidence or evidences, multiple evidence forms, evidential forms. You might use examples, exemplification, your own personal experience, experience of others, experiences known by you, of strangers that you've read, that you've viewed or experienced. You can also have facts, data, research data, graph charts, whatever, to explain that relative abstract in more detail, right? So he's going to go on and talk about that experience. Here's, again, we go to the italicized statements. Italicized to emphasize. If it's italicized, it usually means it's a point of keen interest, right? Let's take a look at it. Why did you abruptly release that young man's hand and turn away from him when you knew nothing about him? Of course, the answer led me always back to that Knights of Columbus pin that he wore, but that was not a real answer and therefore did not satisfy me. Then I began to do some research work in the field of religion, began to study both Catholicism and Protestantism, until I had traced both back to the beginning of line. This is really going above and beyond the call of duty, right? Really trying to discover and discern and decipher what's going on with people. Now, I would suggest, I'm going to stop right here, but I would suggest, as far as the reading is concerned, I would suggest that you do some type of reading. I'm not saying you have to go out and read volumes and volumes of stuff, and pull out 10, 12, 15, or 20 or more disciplines and go into those in considerable detail as far as introductory information is concerned. I mean, I did that, I understand, but I do think that you have to pick your battles. You have to find stuff that you find important or relevant to you. I could probably give you some help and some hints, pointers. I personally, as I said, I've read a lot of books in various disciplines, and one is theology. I read all the major theological works, the Dhammapada, the Rig Veda, the Analects of Confucius, the Book of Mormon, the Bible, the Quran, right? So I've read, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism. For Judaism is really pretty much the Old Testament, which I've read, right? And the main Eastern and Western religions, theologies, philosophies, really, philosophies on life, right? And I found them to be quite interesting, eye-opening, very illuminating. There's a lot of great, outside people, I think people give religion a bad rap, the ignorant people, the intolerant people. You hear these people talk about, I don't believe in fantasy. I don't believe in imaginary beings sitting on a cloud in the sky and stuff like that. It's just kind of silly. First of all, whether you believe it or not doesn't matter. You don't belittle other people's beliefs like that. That's just mean-spirited. It's arrogant. It's ignorant. It's intolerant. So and I've talked to a lot of people of different religions. I remember I was talking to this one student of mine, and he used to follow me after class every day, member of Islam, and he came here from, can't recall now, but he was going to be an engineer, going for his engineering degree, and he wanted to get, the reason why I came to the United States is to get the green card. Seems that that's pretty valuable around the world. Get the green card, speak English, get an American education, and then he wanted to go back to the Middle East and work. I forget where he was going, the UAE, I think, or something like that, to be an engineer. So he's doing this circumloquacious route, right? But we were talking about our various religious beliefs, and he found a lot of common ground with my beliefs and his beliefs, interestingly enough. And that's something that I found when I was reading through these sacred texts, the Dhammapada, the Rig Veda, Analects of Confucius, Quran, Judaism, Old Testament, Christianity, New Testament. And there was quite a bit of common ground. I remember I also, one time I was going to possibly get a full-time job teaching while I was working on my master's. I think I was substitute teaching. And then I thought, well, why don't I can get a full-time job for a couple of years teaching high school English rather than doing this part-time stuff. I didn't do it. I just stayed part-time for whatever reason. I can't remember why, but I stayed part-time. But anyways, I interviewed at a school, Muslim predominantly. And I said, you have people here of other religions? Yeah, we do. There's some tolerance right there. And you might hear, some bad things about Islam, but that's the more extreme side of the belief system. And, there's always various interpretations of religious texts or non-religious texts, various interpretations of science. Not everybody believes in climate change or believes in it the same way. That's science. That's not religion. Science, again, is based in empirical data. You can observe it. You can touch it, taste it, smell it, feel it, right? You've got data. You've got the sensing devices. You've got measuring devices, that don't have a human bias to them, right? So you're getting a very, very unbiased, not perfect observation or understanding of phenomenon, physical phenomenon, but nevertheless, it doesn't really call for emotional interpretation. Yeah, and religion, on the other hand, is it's more based it's faith-based belief in things not seen, right? So there is a difference, but there's also commonalities. If you look around enough, and if you're tolerant enough, you can find more commonality in things than you could imagine. I read this book, don't know the name, can't remember the author, a long time ago, and it was talking about religion and science, and talking about there were actually some there was some common ground covered by both disciplines or topics, I guess. For instance, one was energy. In science, energy is never created or never destroyed. And in religion, some people think that the human spirit is never created, it's always been around, it's never created and will never be destroyed. And it's pure energy, right? And that's what scientists or physicists believe about most matter. It's energy, right? Energy, it's matter that's never been created and will never be destroyed. It's always been there and always will be there. It just takes different shapes and forms and things like that. Anyways, so I get off on a tangent there, but nevertheless, you know what I'm trying to say. Anyways, let's look at the quoted statement here. Wipe the slate of what I believe to be my previously gathered knowledge, and to unlearn much that I had previously believed to be true. That's supposed to be had, right? There you go. So you really have to be patient, disciplined, a little maybe skeptical. Don't just judge everything you hear right off the bat or believe everything. You know, don't go into a ignorant mindset where, you know, I'm just totally anti-religion. And all these people who are religious or believe in religion, the 80% of the world, right? Something like that, some percentage like that, who believe in religion, they're all nuts, you know. Are all religious people nuts? I'm sure you know some people. There's some very famous people who are very religious, highly religious. Are they nuts? Are they useless? Should we just devalue their entire existence based on the fact that they believe in imaginary beings that live on clouds or wherever they may reside? You know, I can't prove God exists or can't prove he doesn't exist. So people have been getting something out of these religions for quite some time. And of course, they do get perverted. And that religion has been used and abused. Sometimes people have made money off of it. You know, just donate today, give me $10,000 and I will save your soul, or whatever it is, you know, those hucksters, you know. And also, you know, people have used it to try to dominate entire cultures and entire regions and so forth. But that's not the majority. The majority of those who are religious, that I've met many of all different types of religions background. The common people. I'm not talking about, you know, people in the positions of power. Those are usually the small number of people. You know, like in the United States or any other country, there's a very small number of people who are making the big decisions, you know, as to where this country goes, what it does economically or militarily or otherwise. You know, those decisions are usually left up to a few elected officials, people that we put into office, and they sometimes, I'll just say sometimes and be nice, sometimes make bad decisions. The power mongers, I guess we could say. Anyway, so let's move on. Let's go back down to the bottom. Comprehend the meaning of that which I have just stated. Imagine yourself suddenly discovering that most of your philosophy of life has been built of bias and prejudice. This is something that I've taught in my critical thinking classes, right? Let me just finish it and then I'll go with what continue talking about what I was thinking about. Making it necessary for you to acknowledge that far from being a finished scholar, finished, not finish, like from Denmark, finished scholar, you were barely qualified to become an intelligent student, right? Barely qualified. Yeah. So One of the reasons why people believe certain things is because they've believed them for quite some time. And people really don't want, they would rather just continue to believe out of total ignorance what they believe, and especially if they've believed it for many a year, rather keep believing it than believing that what somebody else is saying is right and they're wrong, and that they've based their life upon, or a good portion of their life at least, upon misinformation or outright lies or whatever qualification that knowledge may be, qualifying factors that knowledge may entail. That's tough. So again, that's a critical thinker. That's someone who goes deeper than the average person. And it takes guts to be a good thinker, to be a good, non-judgmental thinker, right? Someone who is tolerant, right? Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot more I can get into in regards to critical thinking and that concept or point. But I think I'll do that at a later date when I go over my my book, my material. But this is some very good points. I am not, this is kind of like thick face black card. There are points and passages and sections. There may be a paragraph or two that I am not fond of or find useful or meaningful to me, or maybe to my clients or students or whomever. And sometimes I find entire sections or maybe a whole chapter that I really don't get much out of or believe. But the thing is that nobody knows everything, and nobody knows everything as well as they need to know it or should know it. So everybody has blind spots or spots that are inaccurate or misinformed or whatever. Yeah. So and that's another reason why I'm not going over these lessons in minute detail, verbatim, step by step. I'm kind of, again, giving an overview and trying to give you a feel for what each chapter is about individually, and then the overall point or concept of the book, the law of success in 16 lessons, right? And it takes a while. It'll take a while to put it all together in your head, in your mind, and to use it and utilize it. It's like anything. It takes work and time and effort. That was exactly the position which I found myself with respect to many of what I believe to be sound fundamentals of life. But of all the discoveries to which this research led, none was more important than that of the relative importance of physical and social heredity. For it was this discovery that disclosed the cause for my action when I turned away from a man whom I did not know on the occasion I have described. It was this discovery that disclosed to me how and where I acquired my views, and there's something I talk about, of religion, politics, economics, and so forth and so on. And I both regret and rejoice to state that I found most of my views on these subjects without support by even a reasonable hypothesis, much less, that's great. I found most of my views on these subjects without support by even a reasonable hypothesis, much less sound facts or reason, right? So this is a problem. You really, really, really got to pay attention to this. And I think this is where a lot of bias and intolerance comes from, prejudice, bias, intolerance, is that you grow up, you're born in a certain place, in a certain time, in a certain locale or location, into a certain culture, into a certain religion, into a certain family, into a certain economic condition, and so forth, so on, right? Influences, maybe your parents are really into NASCAR. Maybe they're really into Broadway plays. I don't know. You know what I mean? So, and kids are highly influential. A lot of kids absorb not only language and what parents are saying, language as in speaking English, French, or whatever. kids not only pick up language, but they also pick up meaning, the meaning of life, the meaning of culture, the meaning of the individual, the meaning of family through osmosis, or it's really not a conscious thought or a conscious thinking it through, right? You just kind of do it, right? It's like being a fan of a particular team, such and such a team from a city, fill in the blank city, wherever, greatest team ever with the greatest players ever, when these are the greatest fans ever, right? No. I mean, maybe some fans are great, right? Just because, and that's another thing. Once you find out that there's people out there who like the same stuff that you like, right? That's when you go, oh, geez, you're so smart. And you know what? You're a really good looking person as well. But as soon as you find somebody that you are in opposites to, oh, you like that particular religion or political stance or culture or music or books or whatever, so it's so easy to kind of fall out of favor with people just because you don't find common ground, right? But again, the funny thing is that a lot of us, that ground that we're on, common or otherwise, is oftentimes this, most of my views on these subjects I found most of these views of these subjects without support by even a reasonable hypothesis, much less sound facts or reason, right? We just believe them. There's also a lot of other things. It's not just familial influences. And by family, I mean, it could be religion or culture or education or whatever. Your family or family members are brought up on or through, right? It's not just that. There's other stuff that you hear, through teachers or maybe on television or through famous people, or famous individuals who influence you. Like music is very influential. I grew up listening to a lot of different bands and artists and really listening to the lyrics intently and getting, lessons on life or little hints and tidbits on how to deal with philosophy, on how to deal with life and so forth and so on. So that's stuff that needs to be gone into in much more detail. Then down below, this is what I was talking about. I just saw, I am a Democrat because my father was one, right? I see that you are a very staunch Democrat, said he. And I wonder if you know why you are. I thought of the question for a few seconds, then blurted out this reply. I am a Democrat because my father was one, of course, right? And that's it. Why do I love the Lakers or New York Giants or the Boston Red Sox? Greatest team ever, greatest players ever, greatest fans ever. Nah, not necessarily, But we get emotionally attached to something like that, and that causes problems too. You get emotionally attached to it, and anybody who degrades or attempts to degrade your team, people will sometimes, you get into fights, shouting matches, punching matches. You see them, just go online, you'll see them out there. People, especially they get a little drunk and you dissed my favorite player, my team, my town, you must die, that type of thing. With a broad grin on his face, the senator then nailed me with his rejoinder, just as I thought. Now, wouldn't you be in a bad fix if your father had been a horse thief? Right. See, that's it, right? And that's how easily we are influenced. And that's something else I really got to go into, how easily we are influenced and programmed. And oftentimes there's no logic or reason or research or understanding it's exactly why we think the way we think or say or do the things that we do. We just do them, right? And repetition is also a great way in which certain entities like your government or maybe psychologists or advertisers, maybe even educators, maybe your parents, I don't know. If you repeat something enough, it doesn't even have to be true. If you repeat something enough, eventually people will just believe it, because most people are not thinking rationally, logically, They're not being, skeptical. Skeptical to me is the way I teach at my critical thinking classes is just, don't just, absorb everything you hear. You're on record all the time and you put your think button off, you turn your think button off. You don't pause, you unfiltered, you just let it, I believe. Everything I hear on the radio, everything I see on the TV, everything my parents say, everything my teacher says is believe, right? Because there's almost always some bias, sometimes some prejudice, sometimes intentful manipulation. Politicians do it, advertisers definitely do it, right? I know because I have a business, so I know how to market and advertise. And there are certain kind of underhanded things that you can do to get people, attack their needs, focus on what keeps them up at night. What's scary? This, remember how fear mongers, this is what politicians do. Get you afraid of something, get you on your back, get back on your heels, right? And then I will give you the solution. You vote for me and I'll make you feel better. You don't have to be back on your heels. I will heal you through my policies and my political know-how. And then they just get into power and do whatever they want anyways, forget you. Statistically, research has been done on this, that 90% of what politicians do has little to do with their base or, who votes for them, the general population out there, and almost everything to do with getting into power, remaining into power, and, keeping the palms of those who are in power, usually the donor base, the people they give money to, who have millions and billions of dollars, who have the real power. Politicians really don't have power. They don't have a lot of money. They do have certain level of influence, especially the longer they stay in power. But most of them, very rarely do you see a politician or someone going into politics and they're wealthy, worth millions or billions. It happens, but the majority of the time, most politicians are not, right? So once they get in there, they want to stay in there, or maybe they got in there through finding people who have money, and that's usually probably the most common way to do it. And then they want to stay in there, so they find the people who will keep them in there, keep them going. And to especially high level politics, Congress, Congress, President of the United States, high level politics. I'm not talking about your local positions where you're representing your town or maybe your county or something at a relatively smaller level, but I'm talking a state level or maybe the federal level. Then you need some money, to get into power, to stay in power. So you look around, shop around, find people who have money, and they say, "Yeah, I'll give you some money. What are you going to do for me? Yeah, I give you a favor, you do me a favor." So politicians are gatekeepers. They do favors for the people with the money, and that's how they get into power, stay in power. To a great degree, mostly they get into power by the vote, by average citizen, who oftentimes they will tell those citizens what they want to hear. And then once they get in, 90% of the time, as the research has shown, 90% of the time, they're not doing what their voter base wants, but they're doing what their donors want, right? I remember George Bush looking out amongst the crowd one time and goes, "It's great to be before my base." He said it. I don't know, it's the quiet thing. I mean, most people half awake and aware know what's going on. If you listen closely, people will usually reveal themselves pretty readily. Anyways, hearts like doors can open, must be a new word, open with ease to very, very little keys. And don't forget that they are these. I thank you, sir. And if you please. Oh, there you go. Be nice. Want your door open? Want to get into office? That you may learn how and where you acquired your philosophy of life in general, that you may trace. So this is the stuff you need to do, right? You may have a detailed illustration of the far-reaching effects of one of the important principles uncovered by the incident to which I have referred. That you may learn how and where you acquired your philosophy of life in general, that you may trace your prejudices and your biases to their original source, right? And a good critical thinker does this. This is kind of critical thinking stuff, right? Good critical thinker does that, right? And it's difficult. It's time consuming. It's being very honest. It's going beyond the call of duty. Most people will not do that, Most people don't care to. I'm biased and prejudiced. I'm a jerk. I'm going to stay a jerk. Is that good? Probably not good for you or your family or anyone you associate with. Right? That you may discover, as I discovered, how largely you are the result of the training you received before you reached the age of 15. I've heard in some circles, influential circles, that most of how you'll function, and most of how you'll function upon the world and see the world, is determined by the time you're 8 years old. So 15, that seems to be a little older, but yeah, the training years, maybe when you're 5, 6, you're still too young, you're not thinking too rationally. But you start to get to 7, 8, 9, 10, you start to see things a little differently. You're a little more rational. Definitely when you get to 12, 13, 14, you are, as psychologists say, beginning to think more rationally. You're moving in leaps and bounds in rational thought when you're 13, 11, 12, 13 or so, right? Starting to differentiate between fact and fiction, right? So this is all good stuff. This is all stuff you need to know. How to abolish war. Well, good Lord. You should probably read that. The Catholic and Protestant. That's the IRA, that which is going on. I guess it's still going on in Ireland, right? The Protestants fighting the Catholics. There's one reason why religion gets a bad rap, right? The Catholic is a Catholic because of his early training. Protestant is a Protestant for the same reason, right? It's just like gang members, right? You're born north of such a street, you're in our gang. You're born south of that street, you're of our gang. People north have a blue handkerchief in their pocket. People south have a red handkerchief. Blue, if you've seen red, shoot it, vice versa. And why are you killing? Or fighting or contentious because of the color of a handkerchief, or maybe because of a name, a religion, right, that you've chosen. And both are Christian. There's some slight variation on the thing, but they're both Christian. They believe in to a great degree the New Testament. But the funny thing is, even in Christianity, there are literally thousands. Talk about intolerance, right? There are literally thousands of sects, sects, right? Groups or branches branching off from the basic Roman Orthodox Christian from way back when, right? Yeah, thousands. I remember, I don't know if you remember phone books, but I remember opening up a phone book one time when I was younger and just see, so many, dozens of pages of churches, different churches. You got your Catholic and your Protestant and your Methodist and all these, divisions and subdivisions of all worshiping, they're all Christians. Meaning they follow Jesus, meaning they read the New Testament, follow the New Testament, right? So it's a wickedly wild and complicated web we weave, right? A prominent clergyman indicated how well he understood the principle of social heredity when he said, "Give me the control of the child until it is 12 years old, and you can teach it any religion you may please after that time. For I will have planted my own religion so deeply in its mind that no power on earth could undo my work." That's pretty intense. I don't know if that's true. That's kind of crazy, but unless you have that person under your control all the time, what if they leave town and they go to another country and get influenced otherwise, So I think that's a little extreme. It's hyperbole, a little overstated. But it's still, to a degree, I understand what he's saying, right? Or to a degree, yes, you can probably control. I don't know about that age. I don't know about that level of control, but everything else is true. Most people don't, especially young people, right? You can convince them that, you know, X sport is the greatest sport, or X team is the greatest team, or X player is the greatest player, or X religion is the greatest religion, or culture, this culture is the greatest, whatever. You know, in this part of the country, this town, this time, you know, no town, no state, no town, no time has been better than now. In this town, in this state where we live now, this is the best ever. So that's all kind of crazy. This stuff you really got to think through, right? Oh, here's some good stuff. The people of the United States have immortalized Washington and Lincoln because they were the leaders of the nation during times when the minds of the people were highly emotionalized. True. That's back when voter turnout was almost 100%. Why? It was brand new. Look at this. We just got liberated from the Brits, Britain, right? Fought the British, 1776, roughly. I know the time's a little different, but in actuality, just like they didn't fight on Bunker Hill, they fought on Breed's Hill. I don't know why they never changed it. But anyways, we'll go with 1776. That's close enough, even though that's not the exact date, but you know what I'm saying. So, you know, the colonies, they received their liberation, and that's when all things started, right? And voter turnout was 100%. But over the years, it started to go down. You know, people get spoiled and lazy, and goes down to 90%, 80%. What's voter turnout now? 40%? Because people are just, it's been so watered down. You know, this freedom, this constitutional republic. It's not a democracy. You know? The way in which we elect our officials is democratic. You know, for the people, by the people. But it's a really constitutional republic. Constitution is the law of the land, which we function under, that umbrella. And it's also a republic, right? You've got the federal and the state, right? And the states are usually sovereign. Look that word up if you don't know what that means. Sovereign means they're like the kings and queens and should be in control, according to the Constitution. Are those laws always followed to the T by your politicians? No. At the federal and state level, no. By Congress, no. By legislatures, state and federal, no. And there's a lot of proof out there that that's true, right? But anyways, I'm getting off on more tangents, right? Because they were the leaders of the nation during times when the minds of the people were highly emotionalized as a result of calamities, which shook the very foundation of our country, probably the very foundation of their souls, and vitally affected the interests of all the people through the principle of social heredity, operating through the schools, American history, and through other forms of impressive teaching. The immortality of Washington and Lincoln is planted in the minds of the young and is in that way kept alive, right? Yeah, you've got the Lincoln Memorial. He's a god, you know. Is it Lincoln that's kind of got the over the shoulder? I think that's the Washington Monument, right? They show Washington sitting there, and he's got kind of a half a robe or half a body showing there, and he's chiseled, you know, like he's all muscular and god looking, right? And he's huge, and he's enshrined, and he's god looking, right? Washington and Lincoln were both very fallible people. Washington killed a French lieutenant. That was not a very good move on his part. It devastated him, put him in a bad light for many of those who were influenced by him, especially in the military. Right? Not the most eloquent speaker, not the most brilliant man by any stretch of the imagination. And when he first became general, he didn't know anything about being a general. It was his first time being a general. So he had to learn on the job. And most of the time he learned on the job by those who had a little more experience, or by commanding officers in the field who were usually younger than him, right? And he had to humble himself. There you go. There it is again. Humble himself and listen. Yes. Do what? What'd you say? How does it work? How does it go? Right. And you know, it also took him some time to get his troops to work for him, right? Because this was not like the British regulars or the British Army, which had been around for a long time, and it was really disciplined. If you did something wrong, they would just whip you, you know, or kill you, shoot you, right? With this new voluntary American or colonial military regulars, I guess, they were mostly farmers, and you couldn't just say whip them. Screw you, Washington. I'm going back to my farm. So there really weren't. It wasn't as organized, systemically organized or as established. So he kind of had to reason with his soldiers, and most of the battles he lost. Why? Because they were untrained, and it took them. They were learning on the job. It took them some time, right? They definitely lost more battles than he won, right? Lincoln, same thing. A real ugly guy. Lincoln once said, if I'm two-faced, why would I wear this one, right? Because he himself knew he was ugly, right? Grew up poor, and you know that we don't like poor people, right? Poor are always looked down upon. So he was not revered. He didn't come from royal blood. He didn't go to any expensive college. He learned on the job, learned to become a lawyer through being an apprentice, right? Had a terrible relationship with his father. That kind of messed him up. He was depressed a lot. He had a fascination with death. He was very non-confrontational, right? So he had a lot of negatives. Lincoln and Washington were big losers. Right? Washington in war, and Lincoln probably more so than Washington in personality. He wasn't rich. Lincoln was probably, as far as intellect went, was pretty smart. But he had no royal blood or background in that regard. People weren't looking at him as the next great thing, right? And it took him a long time. He failed in business multiple times, 3-4 times at least. He failed in politics numerous times. Finally, got some success when he was in his 50s, early 50s, and became president of the United States. And of course, the rest is history. President, and then he got shot, assassinated before not too long. So that didn't last, right? So all these things. Anyways, what else we got? Any ideal that has the active cooperation of these three forces, schools, churches, and public press. Sorry, I missed that part of it. Three great organized forces through which social heredity, I talked about that. Schools, churches, and public press. Public press, now it's mass media, right? People are actually getting away from being influenced by mainstream media. What else they got? Not mass media, mainstream media, or the legacy media. Like CNN, MSNBC, even Fox. Their ratings are dropping, and things are now becoming much more individualized, where more and more individuals are coming forth and creating their own thing. Either by themselves or through small organizations online. There's all these different news sources out there, right? Fewer and fewer people are public press. Would be the newspapers and magazines, which are kind of, do people read newspapers anymore? Yeah. And it used to be news organizations, news networks, but even those people don't listen to as much anymore or believe in, so, but schools, churches, politicians, maybe to a degree. Any ideal that has the active cooperation of these three forces during the brief period of one generation be forced upon the minds of the young so effectively that they cannot resist it. And again, you got to take these things with a grain of salt. They cannot resist. What makes them? The reason why I wouldn't say cannot resist. They do not resist. If they're made aware of what's going on, they're probably more likely to resist, right? But I wouldn't just say cannot in an absolute sense. Like you're brainwashed. I have been brainwashed, and I believe through my schools, churches, and through the press that X, Y, and Z is true. I cannot be changed. That's not really factual or fact-based, especially nowadays. So much information out there. Anyways, takes but a second to administer a rebuke, but it may take a lifetime for the one who has been rebuked to forget it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, people are very sensitive. It's funny that, or interesting, not funny, haha, but interesting, that many people online say so-and-so is soft. This politician is soft. This athlete is soft. This actor or performer or whomever, public figure, fill in the blank, is soft, right? They're so easily flustered, you know. Everybody is. That person who's talking about it is probably more flustered, more easily flustered than anybody else. And the reason why he's probably talking about it, well, out of ignorance for sure. But the reason why he or she is talking about it is because they know they're at a complete disadvantage in that regard, right? I get rebuked, I'm gonna hang on to that forever. I hate that in me. So I'm gonna say all those people that do it are weak. I hate it in me. I hate it myself. Yeah, those people are weak. I hate those people. What he's saying is he hates himself, right? For being weak. Usually the people that attack are the ones that are not attacking others, but they're attacking themselves. Oh, you're weak, you're soft. You know, who's weak or soft? Why are they so mad? What's so, why are they so angered? You know, they're angered most likely because it's them. They're the ones who are soft and they hate it, right? So it's projection, it's just lashing out. You're soft, so you're not going to be strong enough to admit it. So you don't admit it, and instead you lash out because you're soft and you'll get anger, and you'd rather just lash out at somebody else rather than say, I'm at fault, I'm sorry, I have to do something, I'll humble myself, I'll admit that I'm soft and fix it. Yeah. That's a terrible way to live, right? A lot of that out there. You see a lot of that online, right? All the time. Stay offline. Good Lord. That's a very, very toxic environment. People just getting super nasty at the slightest thing. I mean, I'm online and I do make some statements, but 98% of the time I don't respond because it's pointless. I'll definitely express my opinion, make a statement, but I'm not going to try to convince somebody who doesn't believe me or is negating what I'm saying that, you know, I'm right, they're wrong. Yeah, so I went online and I spoke to someone who didn't agree with me, and I made them agree with me. It was amazing. Said no one ever. So don't waste your time. Don't waste your energy. You know. Let me see. I think the plan, war grows out of a desire of it. We cannot be stopped suddenly. So I think you get a general idea what's going on. Again, there's way too much here to cover that I would want to go into, right? So we're into lesson 16. I hope that helps out. We'll see you soon. Take care.